Здравствуйте, мальчики и девочки, в эфире программа Ushanka Show. Hello, boys and girls, and welcome back to Ushanka Show, stories about life in the Soviet Union. If you are new to my channel, my name is Sergey, and back in 1971, I was born in the USSR. Я родился в Советском Союзе.
Again, the Soviet Union was a fucking shithole with a ton of lipstick on its ugly face. And the fact that you keep reposting this crap here doesn't serve you well. There are a lot of crappy places in the US. You're right, but the USSR was a shithole with a handful of nice places instead. I know you're trying to monetize the excitement naive Americans experience towards the fucking Soviet Union, but deep inside, even you know that you're lying. You can bullshit the hell out of some very naive Americans, but I can see it for what it is. The propaganda bullshit. Shame on you.
So today we're gonna talk about Grigory Vasilyevich Romanov. If you have no idea who Grigory Romanov was, it's actually good news because that means that you're not a tanky. When I started Ushanka Show several years ago, initially I got flooded with the request to make a video about Grigory Romanov, and I was like, I have no idea who you're talking about, so don't feel bad. I was born in the USSR and I also had no clue who Grigory Romanov was. Once in a while, I post some stuff on subreddit called r/USSR, and recently I posted there a couple of photos from my what I call archive, and that was an image of Brezhnev and Andropov. I don't know even why, but when they passed away back in 1983, 84, I actually cut out their portraits. They came in the black frame because they died. And those pictures I posted on Reddit. If you follow my channel, you may remember that story when I talked about Brezhnev and then Andropov when they were dropping off dead. I mentioned then we didn't have snow days in the Soviet Union, but we had a dead leader days when there was no classes. We just sat in the gym and watched TV, we watched the funeral. So this was my comment when I posted those pictures of Brezhnev and Andropov. It's about in Soviet Russia there is no snow day, but there's a dead leader day. And sure enough, under this post there was a comment about Grigory Romanov. So there is a theory out there among the socialists and modern communists and people are called tankies that if Grigory Romanov, not Mikhail Gorbachev, would become a next leader of the Soviet Union, everything will be much better. The Soviet Union will be still a country. And so this is like a general concept that Grigory Romanov was robbed of the leadership and the traitor Gorbachev took over and he ran the Soviet Union into the ground. So this comment on my Reddit post was the final straw that broke my back, and I decided, okay, I'm making a video about Grigory Romanov and I need to educate myself. So I did extensive research in Russian. I went through the different Russian sources. I read a lot of leftist comments on that and articles and found quite a few interesting things. So today we're going to talk about what if Grigory Romanov, not Gorbachev, was the next leader, and generally who was Grigory Romanov. But before we begin, I want to tell you my vision of what happened to the Soviet Union. Here we're talking about we just needed a different driver. The car was okay, it was doing fine. We just put the wrong driver and he drove that car into a ditch. And then of course, we see this highway of history and you see this car with the license plate says Soviet Union and it's in a ditch. So people claim that was just the wrong driver. My personal opinion, when I see a car in a ditch, it's because car broke down. It didn't matter who was the driver. The car itself failed and that's why it's in a ditch, but it's my personal opinion. Okay, so Grigory Vasilyevich Romanov was another big shot Soviet apparatchik. He was born in 1923 and he passed away in 2008. So being born in 1923, Grigory Romanov was like the third wave of Soviet leaders, if you will. It's the same third wave where the Gorbachev came from. Gorbachev was born in 1931. Also Boris Yeltsin was born in 1931. So Grigory Romanov was like a little bit older, just 8 years older, but it also looks like it was a third wave. You know what's interesting? I just kind of made a quick research while recording this video. There's about 30-year gap between the waves. So the first wave, like Stalin was born in 1878, Vladimir Lenin was born in 1870. The second wave, it's like Khrushchev, born in 1894, Brezhnev, born in 1906, Andropov, born in 1914, and I was too lazy to look up Chernenko, but I bet he's about the same era. So between Stalin and Lenin and Brezhnev and Khrushchev and Andropov, it's approximately 30 years. Okay, so I just looked it up, and sure enough, Konstantin Chernenko was born in 1911, so that's for sure. He is from wave number 2. And as I mentioned earlier, wave number 3, it's Gorbachev 1931, Yeltsin 1931, Romanov 1923. So roughly about 30 years apart once again. The Soviet waves phenomena occurs because Soviet leaders, they die at their desks. So the new growth can't move up until the old growth completely dies out. So Lenin and Stalin needed to die to make way for Khrushchev, and then of course he got removed, Brezhnev, Andropov, and then those guys died out to make room for Gorbachev and Yeltsin. It's the circle of life in the Soviet Union. Sorry, I'm a horrible singer. Okay, and now back to our hero, Grigory Romanov. So the rumor is that Brezhnev was looking at Grigory Romanov as his replacement. I didn't find any documents that actually confirm that, but there's a lot of people, witnesses, talking that, yeah, Brezhnev liked Grigory Romanov a lot, so we're talking about late 70s, early 80s, and he was mentioning that he would like him to be Brezhnev's replacement. But once again, there's no official paper that signed, like he's the guy. I find this rumor kind of suspicious because Romanov built his career and all his life was pretty much around Leningrad, which right now called St. Petersburg. And Brezhnev always surrounded himself with people that he worked with in Moldavia, and Dnipropetrovsk region. So he had the whole crew that he found people that worked with him and he trusted them, and they moved with him. So when he came to Moscow, those people came after him, including Konstantin Chernenko. So as I mentioned, I find it very suspicious. Why would Brezhnev, out of all the people that he trusted, he decided to pick the outsider from Leningrad as his replacement? So let's take a look at Grigory Romanov. His main achievement was running Leningrad for 13 years between 1970 and 1983. And he wasn't a mayor because we didn't have that position. He was Первый секретарь Ленинградского обкома КПСС. So he was the first secretary of Leningrad, and I don't know how to translate it. So he was the top communist of Leningrad for 13 years. During these 13 years of running Leningrad, he got quite a few interesting nicknames. And when somebody gives you a nickname, it usually reflects your personality. So first of all, remember, Romanov is not really cool last name for the communist leader because it's the same last name as the Romanov dynasty. So the last Tsar of Russia was Nikolai Romanov, and here we have Grigory Romanov. And actually that was one of the theories why Grigory Romanov had no chance to become a leader of the Soviet Union, because it would look really awkward. We killed Nikolai Romanov, and 70 years later we installed Grigory Romanov as the leader of Soviet Russia. So one of his nicknames was the Great Duke of Leningrad, so Великий князь Ленинграда. Not a good nickname, right? They also said that during his time was called Romanovskaya epocha, so there was the Romanovs period. So once again, reference to his last name. And they also had a joke saying that в Зимнем дворце снова Romanov. So in Winter Palace we have a Romanov once again. Another say that besides Romanov era regime, they also said there was a police regime, and we'll talk about it later. I forgot to mention then, Grigory Romanov, when he was born back in 1923, he was born in some small village, so he came from the peasant stock, and he always hated intelligentsia. He hated Leningrad culture, and what the worst about him, and I found a lot of confirmation that he was a pathological anti-Semite. He openly hated Jews. And that went through all his career, and he actually was proud of it. During Romanov rule, those 13 years, he forced quite a few popular actors and writers and poets to leave Leningrad. Arkady Raikin, Sergei Yursky, Iosif Brodsky, Sergei Dovlatov, and most of them happened to be Jews. People that worked with Grigory Romanov mentioned that he didn't understand culture at all. He only liked when actors were yelling, "Glory to the Soviet Union! Glory to the Communist Party of the Soviet Union!" He didn't understand anything else. So here I see a lot of similarities with Joseph Stalin, because Stalin also had the same attitude towards the culture, movies, and theater. Here is one of the quotes that I found. So Grigory Romanov was talking about some book, and he said, "Why do we have to publish this book if its editor a Jew? All Jews are anti-Soviet. Все евреи антисоветчики." And if you remember, in the end of the 70s, that's when the Soviet Jews were allowed to immigrate. So there's another quote by Grigory Romanov that almost all Jews are already citizens of the countries of our potential enemy. So he wasn't a big fan of Jewish people immigrating. During one of the interviews when he was already in hospital, so that was around 2007, 2008, he stated that back then, so that's in 70s, Jews were standing on the anti-Soviet positions, and we had to do everything to stop them from their activities. So as you see, hardcore anti-Semite. When he was asked about all these actors that he kicked out of Leningrad, he replied, "Я душил не прогрессивное, а антисоветское. I didn't choke anything progressive. I choked everything anti-Soviet." As many other leaders of that era, Grigory Romanov didn't really have any good education that would help him to run the country. He was born in 1923, as I mentioned earlier, in the village, in a peasant family, and he was the sixth child. He finished only 8 classes, so incomplete high school. And then he went to the trade school in shipbuilding in Leningrad. Then he had to go to war, and he survived the war. Finished college already in 1946. Wasn't a real college, like trade school. Only in 1953 he managed zaochno, so like by mail, graduate from the Leningrad Shipbuilding Institute, and he got a degree in being an engineer of a shipbuilder. So shortly after becoming an engineer, he became partorg, so that's a party organizer at his factory, and that's where his career started. So in 1954 he became a partorg, and about 15 years later, in 1970, he became the boss of Leningrad. Grigory Romanov was heavily involved with the education situation in Leningrad. For example, if the kids that finished high school, школьники, they had a stamp in their passport that they're Jews, so-called пятый пункт, the 5th line in the passport. I had a video about it a long time ago. It was literally impossible for them to get accepted in local university. He made almost like the rule that he didn't want Jews to continue education in the universities. So they had no chance. Also, if you are Jewish, you didn't have a lot of chances to advance your personal career in Leningrad. And generally, he wasn't a big fan of universities and institutes because he considered they were given useless education. And he was working really hard to force high school students to go into the trade schools. It kind of almost rings the bell with the modern situation in America, because he wanted to have more workers available. And one of the reasons that he was forcing high school students into trade schools is because he wanted to limit the limitchiki, just the previous video. This is why I actually wanted to record Limita's story first, is because this is what came up in my research. So he wanted to stop the outflow outsiders into Leningrad. One of the reasons is to reduce the crime in the city. So his way of doing it, because factories in Leningrad, has a lot of factories in Leningrad, were craving for workers. So he's like, okay, I don't want outsiders, so I'm just gonna force our own Leningrad college kids, not the college, high school kids, go to trade schools instead of going to universities. Okay, so here we're gonna stop. So this was the part one story about Grigory Romanov, the guy that could probably save the Soviet Union if he would become a leader instead of Gorbachev. And part two is coming up soon. Don't forget to like this video, and we'll talk to you soon. До свидания. Goodbye.
Потому что если дороги будут, то по ним неприятель проедет и прямо в сердце России попадет.
Я с ними согласен абсолютно.